The question that haunted Martha Henderson for 37 years began with a simple childhood observation. At her grandfather's funeral, she watched the heavy casket being lowered into the dark earth and whispered to her mother a question that would change everything she thought she knew about death and consciousness. What she discovered decades later through the documented work of Edgar Cayce would shatter conventional understanding of what happens to human awareness after the final breath. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Martha wasn't alone in her curiosity. Throughout recorded history, humans have wrestled with the terrifying possibility that consciousness might somehow persist during burial, trapped and aware as the physical form returns to dust. Ancient Egyptian mummification practices, elaborate tomb constructions, and countless cultural rituals surrounding death all hint at a deeper fear that death might not be the peaceful end we hope for. But here's what makes Edgar Cayce's revelations on this topic absolutely extraordinary. Through his unprecedented ability to access what he called the universal consciousness while in deep trance states, Cayce provided detailed answers about the experience of souls during and after burial that challenged every assumption about death, consciousness, and the journey beyond physical existence. His documented responses to this forbidden question revealed truths so profound that they fundamentally altered how thousands of people approached their own mortality. The records housed in the archives of the Association for Research and Enlightenment contain over 14,000 documented readings that Cayce delivered during his remarkable career spanning 4 decades. Among these transcripts lie some of the most controversial and transformative insights ever recorded about human consciousness and its relationship to physical death. What Cayce revealed about the soul's experience during burial would challenge religious doctrine, scientific materialism, and conventional wisdom about the nature of consciousness itself. Martha Henderson's journey to understanding began in 1987 when she stumbled upon a collection of Cayce's readings in a dusty bookstore in Richmond, Virginia. Her grandfather's funeral had occurred when she was just 8 years old, but the image of that casket disappearing into the earth had haunted her dreams for decades. She had developed an almost paralyzing fear of burial, imagining consciousness trapped and aware in the suffocating darkness below ground. The specific reading that would change Martha's life forever was given on October 15, 1943, to a woman whose husband had died suddenly in a mining accident. The widow, consumed with grief and terror about her husband's burial, had sought Cayce's counsel about whether souls could feel pain or fear during the burial process. What Cayce revealed in that reading would become one of the most requested and studied transcripts in the entire archive. According to Cayce's documented response, the soul's experience during burial bears no resemblance to the physical sensations we might imagine. The sleeping prophet, as he was known, explained that consciousness completely separates from the physical form at the moment of true death, making any physical discomfort impossible. But here's where his revelation becomes truly fascinating and deeply comforting to those who fear this transition. Cayce described the soul's experience during the burial process as one of curious observation rather than participation. The departed consciousness, he explained, often remains nearby during funeral preparations and burial ceremonies, not trapped within the physical form but rather watching the proceedings with detached interest. Think of it as someone observing their own graduation ceremony, understanding that while the ritual has significance, their true education and development continue beyond this ceremonial moment. The profound implications of this teaching extend far beyond simple comfort for the grieving. Cayce's insights suggest that our fears about burial stem from a fundamental misunderstanding of consciousness itself. We imagine awareness trapped within decaying flesh because we identify so completely with our physical bodies that we cannot conceive of existence without them. Yet, according to Cayce's consistent teachings across thousands of readings, consciousness represents an entirely separate phenomenon from physical matter. Martha Henderson discovered that her childhood terror had been based on a false premise. The awareness that made her grandfather who he truly was, his essential self, had already moved beyond any connection to the physical form being buried. The casket contained only the temporary vehicle that had housed his eternal consciousness during his earthly experience, no different than discarded clothing after its usefulness has ended. But Cayce's revelations about burial consciousness go deeper still. In multiple readings addressing this topic, he described how departed souls often experience something he called the life review during the periods surrounding their burial. Rather than feeling pain or fear, The consciousness finds itself reviewing the experiences of the recently completed lifetime with remarkable clarity and understanding. This review process allows the soul to comprehend the spiritual lessons and growth opportunities that each experience provided. The timing of this life review process, according to Cayce's documented teachings, varies significantly from individual to individual. Some souls begin the review immediately upon departure from the physical form, while others take days or even weeks to fully transition into this expanded awareness. The burial ceremony, rather than representing a moment of suffering, often marks the completion of the soul's initial adjustment to its expanded state of consciousness. What makes Cayce's teachings particularly remarkable is their consistency across thousands of readings given to different people over many decades. Time and again, when asked about the experience of consciousness during burial, he provided similar descriptions of peaceful observation, life review, and gradual transition to higher awareness. Never once did his readings suggest that souls experience physical pain, claustrophobia, or terror during the burial process. The documentation reveals even more profound insights about the relationship between consciousness and physical death. Cayce consistently taught that the moment of true death occurs when the soul makes its final decision to depart the physical form. This decision point might occur days before the physical body stops functioning, or in cases of sudden death, it might happen instantaneously with the physical trauma. But once this decision is made, the connection between consciousness and physical matter dissolves completely. This understanding transforms how we interpret the burial process entirely. The ceremonies, the casket, the burial itself, all serve the needs of the living rather than affecting the experience of the departed consciousness. The soul that once inhabited the physical form observes these rituals with the same detached interest one might have while watching a movie about someone else's life. The emotional significance belongs to the mourners, while the departed consciousness has already moved into an entirely different realm of experience. Martha Henderson's research into Cayce's teachings led her to discover case after case of people who had received profound comfort from understanding this truth. A mother whose teenage son died in a car accident found peace when she learned that his consciousness had departed before the physical trauma occurred. A veteran haunted by the battlefield deaths of his comrades discovered relief in knowing that their souls had transcended any physical suffering at the moment of their final decision to depart. The documented evidence goes beyond mere aura. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Comfort for the grieving. Cayce's readings suggest that understanding the true nature of consciousness during death and burial can actually enhance our appreciation for life itself. When we realize that our essential self exists independently of physical form, we can live with greater freedom, purpose, and spiritual awareness. The fear of burial, like many fears about death, stems from misidentification with our temporary physical vehicle rather than recognition of our eternal spiritual nature. But here's where Cayce's revelations become even more extraordinary. In several readings, he described how departed souls sometimes attempt to communicate with living family members during the burial process and immediately afterward. These communications, he explained, represent efforts by the transitioning consciousness to provide comfort and reassurance to their loved ones. Rather than crying out in pain or fear, the departed souls often try to convey messages of peace, love, and continued existence. The implications of this teaching extend into practical guidance for those planning their own end-of-life arrangements or dealing with the death of loved ones. If consciousness truly departs at the moment of death decision, then elaborate burial preparations serve primarily psychological and cultural functions, rather than affecting the departed soul's experience. This understanding can free people to make burial arrangements based on practical considerations and the needs of surviving family members rather than fears about the comfort of the deceased. Martha Henderson eventually became a counselor specializing in death and dying, using Cayce's insights to help hundreds of people overcome their fears about burial and death. She discovered that once people truly understood the separation between consciousness and physical form, their anxiety about the burial process virtually disappeared. More importantly, this understanding often led to profound spiritual growth and enhanced appreciation for their current life experiences. The scientific implications of Cayce's teachings about consciousness and burial challenge materialistic assumptions about the nature of awareness itself. If consciousness can exist independently of brain function, as his readings consistently suggest, then modern science's understanding of human awareness represents only a fraction of a much larger reality. The burial process, rather than ending consciousness, simply marks the transition to a different mode of existence that transcends physical limitations. Cayce's documented readings describe the departed consciousness as experiencing expanded awareness, rather than diminished capacity during the post-burial period. The soul, freed from the constraints of physical senses and bodily needs, gains access to broader perspectives and deeper understanding of its eternal journey. The burial ceremony, from this expanded viewpoint, appears as just one small event in an infinite continuum of consciousness development. The comfort provided by this understanding extends beyond individual peace of mind to influence entire families and communities. When people truly grasp that their deceased loved ones experience no suffering during burial, the grieving process can focus on celebrating the life lived rather than worrying about ongoing comfort. This shift in perspective often leads to more meaningful memorial services and healthier approaches to processing loss. Martha Henderson's work with grieving families revealed another dimension of Cayce's teachings about burial consciousness. Many people reported experiencing dreams or intuitive impressions of their deceased loved ones during the burial period that aligned perfectly with Cayce's descriptions of peaceful observation and life review. These experiences provided evidence that consciousness indeed continues beyond physical death and remains accessible to loving connection with surviving family members. The consistency of these reported experiences across different cultures, educational backgrounds, and belief systems suggests that Cayce's insights tap into universal truths about consciousness rather than culturally specific beliefs. Whether the grieving person was Christian, Buddhist, agnostic, or atheist, the experiences of connection with departed loved ones during the burial period followed remarkably similar patterns that matched Cayce's documented teachings. But perhaps the most profound aspect of Cayce's revelations about burial consciousness lies in their implications for how we live our current lives. If death truly represents transition rather than ending, and if the burial process marks celebration rather than tragedy, then our approach to daily existence can shift toward greater purpose and spiritual development. The fear of burial, like other fears about death, often prevents people from fully embracing life's opportunities for growth and service. Understanding that consciousness transcends physical death can liberate people to pursue their deepest purposes without the paralyzing anxiety that comes from identifying completely with temporary physical form. The burial ceremony becomes a graduation celebration rather than a final ending, marking the completion of one phase of eternal development rather than the termination of existence itself. The documented cases in Cayce's readings include numerous examples of people who transformed their entire approach to living once they understood the true nature of consciousness during burial. A businessman obsessed with accumulating wealth discovered greater fulfillment in using his resources to help others. A mother paralyzed by fear of leaving her children found courage to live more fully when she realized that love transcends physical presence. A terminal patient facing his own approaching death found peace and even anticipation when he understood burial as transition rather than ending. These transformations suggest that Cayce's teachings about burial consciousness serve a much larger purpose than simply comforting the grieving. They point toward a fundamental shift in human understanding about the nature of existence itself. When we truly grasp that consciousness continues beyond physical death and experiences no suffering during burial, we can approach both life and death with greater wisdom, courage, and spiritual awareness. The question that haunted Martha Henderson for 37 years had led her to discoveries that would comfort and inspire thousands of others facing similar fears. Edgar Cayce's forbidden answer to whether souls feel pain during burial revealed not just the peaceful nature of the transition, but the eternal nature of consciousness itself. The buried casket contains only discarded clothing, while the eternal soul continues its infinite journey of growth, learning, and love. For those who fear burial or worry about the comfort of deceased loved ones, Cayce's documented teachings provide profound reassurance. The consciousness that makes each person unique transcends physical limitations and experiences burial as peaceful transition rather than traumatic ending. The real person, the eternal awareness, observes the ceremony with detached interest while already beginning the next phase of infinite development. This understanding transforms grief from desperate clinging to peaceful celebration, death from terrifying ending to natural transition, and burial from horrifying imprisonment to ceremonial graduation. Martha Henderson's childhood question had led her to truths that would reshape her entire understanding of existence and enable her to help countless others discover the same transformative peace. The archives containing Cayce's readings continue to provide comfort and insight to those seeking understanding about consciousness and death. His consistent teachings about the peaceful nature of the soul's experience during burial offer hope to anyone struggling with fears about their own mortality or the welfare of departed loved ones. The forbidden answer he provided reveals consciousness as eternal, burial as celebration, and death as transition to expanded awareness rather than tragic ending. Edgar Cayce's revelations about burial consciousness represent just one aspect of his broader teachings about the eternal nature of the soul and its infinite journey of development. The question of whether souls feel pain during burial, when answered through his profound spiritual insights, opens doorways to understanding the true nature of existence itself. Martha Henderson's 37-year quest for answers had led her to discoveries that would transform not just her own life, but the lives of everyone she would eventually help through her counseling work. The fear of burial, like many fears about death, dissolves when we understand the true relationship between consciousness and physical form. Edgar Cayce's documented teachings provide the key to this understanding, revealing burial as peaceful observation rather than painful experience, as graduation ceremony rather than tragic ending, as transition to expanded awareness rather than termination of existence. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.